But I think we should assume the position of a student. We should assume the posture of a student, and we should share a table and ask questions.
Well, howdy, friends, and welcome to the Roundup podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Tidwell, and I have my co-host with me today, Chase Abner. Chase, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, Mitch. I'm excited to hear about the new addition in the Tidwell house.
Well, it's going great. There is a new baby. He's alive. He is well. Sleep is, as you know, is few and far between right now, but we're making it. I'm here. I feel like I got enough energy. I'm ready to go. But it's been good. It's been good.
This is our first podcast since baby boy came along. So
it is November 9th. It's 7:52 p.m. That's when he arrived.
Yeah. So addition of a baby. I also see the subtraction of a mustache.
There is a subtraction of a mustache. I thought when he was, I forgot last time we did talk about that. I thought, a gift that I want to give my second child is just the most like just a dad look. And so I grew out the mustache. And then finally it was like, I think it was 2 or 3 days after he arrived, I looked at myself in the mirror and it just hadn't quite panned out the way that I thought it would. And so I looked at my wife and I said, "What am I doing?" She's like, "I've been trying to tell you that. Shave that thing off." And so I finally shaved it off because it was like, I felt like it was okay as long as I had like some extra like going around like my face a little bit. But then like I just did a clean shave with just the mustache. And I just thought, I just look like a guy who's trying way too hard to have a mustache. So I killed it. I was going to try to hang on till the end of November, but it lasted, I got to about midway through November. So, yeah, anyways. But thanks for bringing that up. I had forgotten about that. I tried to leave it in my past.
We had to have a callback for the mustache for sure.
We did. I appreciate that.
But between myself and our guest today, we have the beard game covered. So let's go ahead and dive in. Let's introduce our guest for today on the Roundup podcast is Micah Fries. He's the Director of Engagement for GlocalNet and the Director of Programs for the MultiFaith Neighbors Network. And we're glad to have you on, Micah.
Man, I'm glad to be here. And so when it comes to the beard chase, I never thought I could grow one. I finally grew it out a few years ago, and my wife tells me how much she loves it, so I keep it, which is a little bit concerning to me because it makes me feel like maybe my face, she likes it better when it's covered. For what it's worth.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm really glad to be here. Glad to hang out with you guys today.
Yeah. Look forward to getting to know you more and hear more about your work. Just go ahead, if you will, Micah, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your family.
Yeah, so I have been a pastor in SBC circles for over 20 years, also served overseas in West Africa. When I first got married, my wife and I went to college at the Baptist College of Florida in Graceville, Florida, and did a degree in theology there, did seminary at Midwestern, and I'm trying to finish up a PhD right now. I'm in the dissertation stage and try and get that done in missiology. My wife, Tracy, if you've ever seen a picture of the two of us, we are exact opposites in every possible way. Personality, physically, the whole 9 yards. So I'm 6'6", she's 4'8". So there's almost 2 feet of difference between the two of us. Nice. And our personalities, if you look at our Myers-Briggs, we're exact opposites in every category. So we're very, very different, but we work well together. And I'm thankful for her. We've been married over 21 years now, coming up on 22 here pretty soon. And we've got 3 kids. Our oldest just turned 18 about 2 weeks ago. So that was a big deal in our house. And Sarah Grace is her name. And then we've got a daughter, Kesed Noel. And she'll be 16 in about a month. And then our son, Haddon, is adopted. We adopted him. Well, let's see. Is it going to be 5 years? Yeah, he'll be 5 years in our home in about a month. We adopted him about a month from now. It'll be 5 years. And he's about to turn 15 years old. And so, so that's our family. We live in the Chattanooga, Tennessee area. And I work from home. Our offices for our organization are based out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But I live here in the Chattanooga area and work from home. So that gives me the freedom to kind of be with my family, but travel a decent amount.
Yeah.
Micah, if I knew you better, I would take a guess at your Myers-Briggs, but I literally just met you. What's your Myers-Briggs?
It is ENTP.
ENTP. Okay.
ENTP.
Okay.
Yep.
ENTP.
There it is. My wife's an ISFJ.
ISFJ. Okay. Nice. So that me and my wife are
toast to Tracy.
Opposite.
I knew you'd appreciate that, Chase.
Yeah. Are you ISFJ? Is that what you're at, Chase?
Yeah.
Okay. I feel like there may be no, you're definitely an S. You're definitely an S. So I'm an INTJ. My wife's an ESFP. Yeah, ESFP.
Oh, nice.
So
you guys are exact opposites as well.
We are. It's a beautiful thing, and sometimes
is.
It can. Whew, and we're working on that. I guess.
It's the same. It's the same in my household. So
really?
my wife is an ENTP, and which is weird because it's highly rare for females to be.
Yeah,
ENTPs.
I was going to say that is unusual.
Yeah. Anyway.
Interesting.
All right, I can totally geek out about Myers-Briggs stuff and personality traits. So, but I'd love to hear more about Micah's work. So, what would you like our audience to know about GlocalNet and your work with the MultiFaith Neighbors Network?
Yeah, so GlocalNet and MultiFaith Neighbors Network, both organizations that were started in whole or in part by Bob Roberts, who's a pastor in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, started Northwood Church 35 plus years ago, and now is an elder at the church, but is no longer the senior pastor there. They've passed on that mantle to Scott Venable. GlocalNet is a Christian organization that does church planting, what we call nation engagement, which is how we help train churches to engage globally. We tell churches don't send missionaries as much as equip your whole church to be the missionary. And so we do really, I'd love to have a whole long time just to talk through our mission strategy, which is really exciting, the way we go in and engage hard, what we would often call hard countries globally. And we walk through the front door, do so with the permission of the government, and really are able to kind of serve and in really cool and unique ways. And so, GlocalNet brings churches together who rally together around a common sense of mission, a common view of the world, common view of cultural engagement and how we engage both locally and globally. So we've got about 200 churches in the GlocalNet family all over the U.S. And so that's GlocalNet. And then the MultiFaith Neighbors Network was an organization started by Bob, Imam Muhammad Majid, who is the Imam of the Adams Center in Washington, D.C., which is one of the two largest mosques in North America. And Imam Majid, he's been there since the mid 80s. There was like 90 people in the mosque when he got there. Now there's 40,000. It's a very influential mosque. He's prayed at every inauguration since President Clinton. He's been a counselor to every president since President Clinton. So he's got a lot of influence in the DC area. And then the third founder of the organization was Rabbi David Saperstein, who was the ambassador for international religious freedom under President Obama, and as a Jewish rabbi in the Reform Jewish movement, and is considered by many folks to be one of the top 5 most influential rabbis in the country. And so those 3 individuals started the MultiFaith Neighbors Network to help bring together predominantly the Abrahamic faith traditions in a multi-faith effort. And we use multi-faith very specifically in opposition, not opposition, but in distinction to interfaith. It's not interfaith, and I can explain more about that in a minute. But we do work together for the good of our communities, and I help provide leadership for that network.
Mm-hmm.
Nice, man.
That's great. And so I'm sure our audience is starting to put the pieces together of why we're having you on our podcast today. The college campus in the United States is very much the Athens of the first century world that we read about in the New Testament, where people are coming from all over to tell or hear something new, and you're having this melting pot really of culture and ideas, and there's just such a great opportunity there, and as Bill Bright says, win the campus, win the world. Well, the world is on our campuses, and with their distinct cultures and religious backgrounds. And so Micah, we were looking forward to hearing more from you just about how college ministry leaders can seize those opportunities, to learn, to grow, and to develop world Christians who are able to engage in those spaces. So I'd love for you to explain a little bit more, like that distinction of multi-faith versus interfaith.
Yeah, so, interfaith is imagined in a whole lot of different ways. You'll see it in different ways. And frankly, those of us who are evangelicals just have not historically been involved in interfaith for a variety of reasons. But one of the primary reasons is because whether it's the case or not in every interfaith, example, it's definitely the perception that to be involved in interfaith means you have to sort of diminish your theological distinctives. And You have to sort of diminish your desire to share your faith, and sometimes even pretend or make the argument that all roads lead to Rome, that we all fundamentally believe the same thing. So we use multi-faith intentionally to say, no, that's not exactly who we are. In fact, that's not who we are at all. What we say with multi-faith is that we acknowledge upfront that whether it's Muslims, Jews, evangelicals, atheists, irreligious folks, Hindus, Buddhists, doesn't matter. We come to the table with very different theological distinctions, and we're not asking anyone to sacrifice their theological identity. In fact, we ask you to be upfront about it, and we want to talk through it. And so when it comes to multi-faith, we're very open and honest about the fact that we have very, very specific, concrete, I'm an evangelical. I like to say this. I was in a meeting 2 days ago in Seattle with Muslims, Jews, and Christians. And I said, look, I'm an actual real evangelical. I believe all the evangelical things theologically. I believe in the exclusivity of Jesus, want to share my faith. But I do believe a few things as well, that every person is created in the image of God, and every person has inherent dignity and worth. And that's not determined by what you believe or practice. And so, yeah, I'm going to share my faith. I would love for everybody to follow Jesus. But if you don't, I'm still going to respect you, still going to love you, and still have a desire to work together with you as much as possible for the good of our community. And the other thing that I firmly believe, and this is sort of unique in evangelical spaces, at least in practice, if it's not in theory, I really believe that the more I engage with people of other faiths, the more it helps enhance my faith, the more it deepens my faith. So I have some very good friends who are Muslims in particular, who I've had very long theological conversations with over the last 6 weeks. I'm just thinking in recent history. We've been through questions like the atonement. We've been through questions of clergy qualifications. We've been through questions of ecclesiology. When my Muslim friends ask me those questions, I can't give pat answers. I have to be able to give substantive answers. I have to be able to explain theologically the rationale. I had a long conversation about what is the gospel. What do we believe about who Jesus was and what he's done for us and how we're saved. These sort of conversations are obviously central to the Christian faith, but often when we're exclusively in Christian or Christian-like environments, we're not challenged very much to have to think through and provide answers for substantive theological questions. And so for us in multi-faith, we would say multi-faith is built around 3 basic ideals. Every person comes to the table with unique theological differences, and it's okay to own those. Every person has inherent dignity and worth, and we're going to affirm that regardless of what you believe or practice. And engaging with people of other faiths is actually good for our own faith, helps deepen and strengthen our own faith. And so when I talk about multi-faith, that's what I'm referring to.
Hey, Micah, what has God used in your own life to kind of give you a passion and expertise in cross-cultural ministry like this?
Yeah, there's a number of things. I was a military kid growing up, and we lived in the Philippines for 3 years when I was really young. And so that probably began to awaken in me a love for the world. My wife and I lived and served in West Africa in a Muslim majority nation. And we moved there 10 days or so after 9/11. And so that was a very formative experience in our lives. We lived way out in the bush, no running water, no electricity, that sort of thing. And we didn't work with the Muslim majority population. We actually worked south of that. But still, just being in that environment began to awaken for me a love for Africa. And now I have an adopted son from Africa and spent a lot of time on the continent. But also just a desire to know more about Islam and get to know more about Muslims. And then there was one very formative experience that happened when I was a pastor in Missouri, in the Kansas City area, about a half hour, 40 minutes north of Kansas City. City of St. Joe, Missouri, city of about 75 to 100,000 people. And there was a small mosque in town that had been saving their money, and they had saved enough money to purchase land and begin to build a permanent mosque in the city. And evangelicals don't have a great reputation of how we respond when Muslims build mosques. And so our church was similar in a lot of ways. We had a lot of people who were concerned and came to me with those concerns. And I knew Bob Roberts at the time, and Bob's been like a father in the faith to me almost 15 years. He's been a mentor to me. I love Bob, I highly respect him, want to be like him when I grow up someday. And I called Bob and I said, Bob, what do I do? I need to understand how to engage the Muslim community. I need to help our people as a pastor. I want to lead them well. Bob said, I want you to do three things, Micah. I want you to contact the local imam, which for those who maybe aren't familiar is like the pastor in the Muslim context. I want you to contact the local imam, see if you can go to a meal or coffee or something with him. I want you to buy a Quran and read it so that you know what Muslims believe. And he said, I don't want you to read a book by a white Christian guy explaining what Islam is. I said, okay, I can do all those things. Now, having said that, my friend Keith Whitfield and I now have put together a book called Islam in North America. So we're two white evangelical guys who put together a book. And Bob contributed a chapter to the book. So, there's that. But I did those three things. And when I asked the imam if we could get together, it took me a while to get in touch with him. And he said, yeah, that would be great. He was a part-time imam because it was a small mosque. And mosques are like most evangelical churches. They tend to be smaller, bivocational leaders, volunteer leaders, that sort of thing. He was a physician, if I remember correctly, from Egypt. And he said, I'll come as long as I can bring someone with me. I said, that's fine. He brought this man with him who became a friend of mine, who was a former Catholic from Boston who had converted to Islam. And it occurred to me finally a little while later that he brought this guy along as a bodyguard because he was concerned. He had fear for meeting the evangelical pastor in town. Yeah. And that cut me like a knife when that occurred to me. I thought, man, anyone who's read the Gospels, anyone who's studied the life of Jesus would know that Jesus responded aggressively with anger. There's examples of that in the scripture. But if you'll notice, those were always directed toward his own tribe who were misusing the faith for their own gain. Yeah. When Jesus engaged with people who were not part of his faith, there was love, compassion, grace, and hey, Zacchaeus, can I come to your house today? And that was his model. And I thought, man, you read the Sermon on the Mount, you read the Beatitudes, there should never be a time when people who are not Christians are scared of engaging with those of us who are evangelicals. And yet this is our reputation. This is what people think of us. Yeah. And it really bothered me. And so that's what began for me. Every place I've lived now, since then, I've engaged the Muslim communities. I'll attend their Friday prayer services. I don't participate. Everybody's always fearful. Oh my gosh, I'm not joining in and praying with them. I'm sitting in the back. I'm watching. I'm learning. I'm asking questions, and I'm becoming friends with people in the Muslim community. I've done the same in Jewish synagogues as well. And I want to be friends with people who don't share my faith. For one, I want to share my faith with them. But two, I think Jesus, the model of Jesus, is that he was friends with people who didn't agree with him and didn't believe what he believed. Yep.
That's beautiful. I mean, I love that story. It's convicting and also inspiring. Just thinking about, what can happen when you just sit at a table with people and break down those preconceived notions that they have and that we have.
There was some, I remember when I first, in the community I moved in, there's a Mormon church nearby, and, of course, the missionaries are making their rounds. And I remember just as an early believer, they would come by and just have those conversations, which was so good for me, because I think what you had mentioned earlier is it allowed me to say, hey, I've got to really believe what I believe. Like, this is not, I can't just give the church answer here because they're asking real questions. And then I'm even wondering, like, well, why do I believe that? And I felt like that experience really deep in my faith. But on the other hand, part of that too was they were just so used to becoming defensive of evangelicals and some of their attacks on them and their Mormon faith. And so that was like it was a big eye-opening point for me, just as a really young believer with someone of a different faith, to see like not only one did I need to deepen my faith and really believe what I believe, but then to also see that my job here is not to just win this argument with this person, but truly just as Jesus did. I always say, Scott Kindig used to say, like, Jesus, he always came hard with the people in his tribe and some of this religious elite, but he came soft to those who were different and of different faiths of them.
You just said something I think that's really important, Mitch, to be honest with you. You said, I wanted to win these arguments, or you said something basically along those lines. So much of our cultural engagement with people who are not followers of Jesus is centered around winning arguments. And apologetics, even as an entire construct. And I'm not objecting to apologetics in and of itself. But the way we often work apologetics out in Christian context is, let's get all the information we have so we can win all the arguments. And we think if we can win the argument, we can win them. They're going to follow Jesus if we can win the arguments. Here's my question for you. How many times have you had arguments with your kids where you won the argument and their heart changed because you won the argument with your kids. Now, they may do what you tell them to do because you're an authority figure, but you don't win their hearts by winning arguments.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the data bears this out. The scripture bears this out. Know people, love people, share your faith with people, and trust the Lord to change hearts. Man. And we struggle with that concept. We want to win arguments and force decisions. I think our response should be know people, love people, share our faith with people, and trust God for the results.
Man.
I think on the...
Oh, go ahead, Jess.
I was just going to say, like, in a college campus environment, especially when you're working with maybe students who come from a Christian background, very churched background, and they're getting exposed to contrary ideas, maybe for the first time in their life, there is that tendency and that draw to be combative, to win the argument. And some of that is just the insecurity, right? Of like, oh, what I believe isn't the only thing that can be believed. And just that tension of, some of that comes from, I think, just insecurity of like, is what I believe right? If I can prove it's right to this person, then maybe it is actually right. So, but I'd love to hear you just talk, Micah, about, since our audience is college ministry leaders, what is the opportunity you see that they have before them when it comes to multi-faith and bridge building?
Let me respond to something you just said there, and then let me answer that question if I can.
Yeah, sure.
You talk about the insecurity fueling the need to sort of win arguments. One of the things that we've not understood well, I say we, I mean the white evangelical church, we're the 800-pound gorilla in the American room when it comes to religious ideology. Not only have we been the large group in the room for a long time, we also have the most influence among all the religious groups. You know what I mean? That sort of thing. This is one of those ways in which my Muslim and Jewish friends have helped teach me how to engage better, because they've always been a minority in the U.S. And when you're a minority in the U.S., you understand how to engage others who disagree with you better than if you're the majority. If you're the majority, the assumption is everybody agrees with you, or at least you can automatically win. And one of the things we're seeing right now, Christians in America are not persecuted. You'll hear people say, oh, the Christian church in America is being persecuted. That's baloney. That's just not true. Maybe at times we're seeing marginalization. Ed Stetzer, who I used to work for, he likes to say, look, the evangelical church is losing the home field advantage. That's what's happening, right? We had some basic ideological beliefs in evangelicalism that were sort of assumed culturally that are no longer assumed. And what happens is we don't know how to respond when there's a large or sizable group around us who disagrees with us, and they're winning sort of authority and influence, because we've always had authority and influence with our beliefs. And so understanding how to engage people with grace and be winsome and recognize that we may not win every argument, but our orthopraxy matters, that the way we respond to losing arguments, the way we respond to people who disagree with us, says as much about our faith as the content of our words. Jewish and our Jewish and Muslim friends have a lot to be able to help show us how to engage, folks in that regard. When it comes to college leaders helping train and develop their students, I think first what I just talked about really matters, because often college kids come from environments where they're the majority. They go sometimes Christian school, or at least Christian clubs at their public schools, and then they're in church together with their youth group, and that's what their friends look like. And then they come into this more secular environment where evangelical Christian belief is probably a significant minority. And what can often happen is one of two things. They recognize we're the minority, and so either they get angry and combative because they feel insecure and unsure how to engage, or they acquiesce because that's easier than fighting all the time, right? And so then, and we hear this all the time, and you're just going to go off to university and become liberal. What we don't understand is the sociological element that's coming into play. People are trying to survive, and they're trying to survive in a context where they're the minority, and they want to be, they want to have friends, they want to be accepted. And so it's not so much that the argument may be winning them over, even if they don't recognize this. It may be that sociologically, the desire to be one with the community is winning over. So I would say to pastors who are leading in a college context, how do we help equip college students to be a prophetic minority who don't get angry when people disagree with us, but also are convictional enough that we don't acquiesce either in an effort to fit in? And of course, part of that needs to be authentic Christian community where, other believers can rally around them and we can be together and not, I mean, my experience with so much Christian community on college campuses is that we're just sort of weird and detached from everybody else. You know what I mean? Like it's a small group of just strange folks who sort of detach themselves from the broader community. I mean, to me, Jeremiah 29 is probably the best argument for how we ought to engage in a culture that's foreign to our belief system. You've got the exiles who have been taken. I mean, this is the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. This is Daniel. This is this group of exiles who have been exiled out of Jerusalem. They're in Babylon. The false prophets are telling them you're going to go home in 2 years or less. And in Jeremiah 29, God says, no, 70 years you're going to be in captivity, and then I will return you to your homeland. In other words, he's saying to all these adult members of the Jewish community, you're all going to die in captivity. None of you are going to get to see your homeland again. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to plant gardens, and I want you to give your kids in marriage, and I want you to help them raise their kids, and I want you to give them their kids in marriage. And I want you to, in other words, embed yourself in the community and be salt and light in the community, not angry. People say, well, Mike, let's look at how bad the culture is around us. Well, baloney, it's not worse than Babylon. I mean, it's not worse than the Assyrian Empire, where they skinned their enemies alive, where they would round up the children in the middle of the city and kill all the children when they conquered a town to strike fear in the hearts of the adults. I mean, that's grotesque sort of engagement. And he says to them, embed yourself in the community. And then what? Verse 7 says, seek the shalom of the city, for when it prospers, you will prosper. And shalom is not just peace, right? Shalom is bigger than that. It's the holistic blessing of God on a people and a place. So I would say, teach college students, train college students to be a prophetic minority who seek the shalom of the community where they're at. And shalom means sharing your faith, but it also means advocating for racial equity. It means arguing for orphan care and pushing back against sex trafficking, not because those are cool things to do, but because when King Jesus rules and reigns in a place, all people are equal. Nobody's treated as a commodity. Everybody has a family, right? This is what it looks like when the kingdom of God comes to rule and reign in a place. And so this is what I would encourage. Don't teach your kids to be confrontational combative. Don't teach your kids to feel like we're under attack. Teach your kids to love those who disagree with them, to be authentic friends and in relationship with those who disagree with them, and to engage them as a prophetic minority, speaking to the culture as one who loves and respects it, but desires to seek the shalom of your community.
Hey, Micah, when you mentioned, I feel like there's a when as Christians, when there are things in culture or maybe different religions that are different from ours, there's always this like knee-jerk reaction to like defend and attack. So one, why do you think that is? And let's just say you're a 20-year-old college pastor and you're looking to build bridges on campus. How are you, I'm probably asking you too much here, but like how are you building those bridges? How are you equipping your students and keeping them from this like posture of rather than defend and attack to step forward and love and to seek the, like what you said, the welfare of the city? Yeah.
So this is an interesting question, Mitch. You say, why is it that people respond with anger or combative spirits?
Yeah. I
want you to note that in a lot of places around the world, that's not how the evangelical church responds. It is uniquely, and not exclusively, but to some degree uniquely an American response. Mm-hmm. The American church is angry and fearful right now. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it has to do with theology as much as it has to do with a shift in culture. And this goes back to the home field advantage argument that I've just talked about. People, particularly evangelicals who are, say, 40 and above, I'm in that crowd. So I'm in my earlier 40s. But say, I'm looking at Chase with that gray in his beard. Chase is right there with me.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah.
But so let's say the 40 and above crowd. Yeah. We grew up in a time when evangelicalism it's never been the majority. There's never been a majority faith other than maybe non-faith in the U.S. We can say we've been a Christian nation. There was never a time when a majority of Americans were Christians. Okay. So at least in the way we define born again Christianity, but we were certainly the dominant faith expression in the country. And because of that, Christian views were often, if they weren't believed or agreed to, they were at least accepted as norms in the culture, right? So that's not the case anymore. And this is what Stetzer means when he says we're losing the home field advantage. It's not that our faith is diminished. It's not even that our faith is declining. In fact, if you look at the numbers, those who practice an evangelical faith, it's actually slightly increasing, thanks in large part to our minority brothers and sisters, Latino and African American brothers and sisters predominantly. White evangelicalism is declining some. But we're not necessarily declining as a movement, but we're losing our cultural toehold. And so cultural Christianity, while most people would say, well, cultural Christians aren't real Christians because you have to be born again and, you know, that sort of thing, they would still enjoy the benefits that come with a broad swath of cultural Christianity, namely that our views are broadly accepted as norms. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not happening. That's not the same thing anymore. And let me illustrate it this way. Well, let me just, it's like you coming into your home tonight, going home to your house, and somebody else has moved into your home and all of their furniture is in there now. Your furniture's gone. All their paintings are on the walls. Your pictures are gone, and you feel disoriented and angry. How could this happen? This is my home. I think this is what the American church is experiencing right now. This is our home. How could this happen? Our pictures are gone off the wall. Our furniture's been moved. And so because we've not been equipped to be a prophetic minority, which is true in so much of the rest of the world, we respond with anger and fear, and we want that back. And so right now, when you look at politicians, for instance, who cater to conservative Christianity, it's people who are saying, let's fight for it. Let's go back and get it. You know, we'll go back and recapture this sort of ideal. The problem is that's not winsome. That doesn't win anybody over to our side. And the other problem is that argues that cultural identity matters more than genuine faith. That cultural identity is the thing we need most. So if we can just work really hard and fight really hard, we're gonna be able to preserve our cultural identity. And so you're gonna have a lot of college students who are gonna come to school, and they're gonna have that, not because it's their own personal view, but because they have a borrowed faith, right? So many people have borrowed faith, and they're gonna have borrowed faith. It's gonna be what they've heard from their parents and their grandparents, and many of them have never heard anything other than that. And then they're going to come into a more secular environment, and they're going to recognize, if I want to be accepted, I have to shift. And because they've not owned that faith themselves, and they've been taught fear, 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 and now they come into this place, and instead of fear, they're hearing love and acceptance and affirmation and that sort of thing. There's an easy, either they're going to respond with anger, but more likely they're going to respond by shifting or acquiescing theologically and ideologically to what is normative on their campus.
That's good. What I hear you saying is, you know, for college ministry leaders to help develop the type of Christian in their ministry who is able to engage winsomely in these spaces, they have to have a proper understanding of the gospel. They can't have a borrowed faith. Cultural Christianity does not get them to a place of healthy multi-faith interaction. And that's strong. I appreciate that. So teaching is an important part, like teaching the gospel, teaching a Christian worldview, a Christian perspective on the sojourner in your midst, those kind of things. But for a moment, Micah, I want to ask you to kind of, just as a thought experiment, imagine yourself as a late 20s college minister somewhere. Teaching is great, but modeling is way better for students. So you're teaching your students about, you know, you're teaching them the gospel, you're teaching them how to view neighbors of other faiths in their midst. But what would you be doing practically to demonstrate those beliefs for your students?
A learned faith matters. You have to begin with a learned faith, but a lived faith matters even more, right? So much of our church construct is designed around a learned faith, right? So we have events, we have classes, we have training. Everything is about the acquisition of knowledge. What I would encourage is not to diminish that at all. We want to be theologically robust. We want to be orthodox, but we want to live our faith. So here's one of the cool things. I was, again, in this gathering 2 days ago in Seattle with these Abrahamic faith leaders. And one of the things we were talking about is that in Jewish culture, you have the concept of shalom, which is peace, right? In Muslim culture, you have the Arabic concept of salam alaikum, which is the Arabic greeting when you meet someone from an Arabic context. Salam is the Arabic version of shalom in the Hebrew. It means peace, be unto you, that sort of thing. And then, of course, as Christians, we embrace those concepts as well, the shalom, salam. There is a common sense in all three Abrahamic faith traditions that the table matters, that hospitality matters. This is really intriguing. A lot of people, it's interesting because so many people in evangelical context don't know any Muslims personally. In fact, if you're to break up every religious demographic in America, including the non-religious, and put them in a category, the demographic with the least percentage of relationships with Muslims would be white evangelicals. 85% of white evangelicals have no relationship with a Muslim. So we don't know Muslims. And so we have misconceptions about them, false perceptions about them. We hear the worst of some of the radicalist, and that's sort of how we define the rest of the entire movement. And so we don't know Muslims. And so, for instance, I would say to you that at the heart of every Muslim that I know is hospitality. It is central to who they are. It's central to their culture. It's central to their faith. And that would surprise a lot of people. They would think, oh, wait a minute, Muslims don't want to be friends with Christians. They do. I'm telling you, they do. And of course, Jewish folks are the same way. And so I would say begin by sharing a table. This is the easiest thing in the world. I have people ask me all the time, how do I get to know Muslims? Share a table with them. It's the single best. We can talk about training you on how to answer questions about the Trinity and what is the gospel and who is Jesus. And all these questions do matter in Muslim and Jewish context. But the number one most important thing you can do is regularly share a table. Sit around the table. And the second thing I would say is this, and this is hard for us as Christians. We want to constantly communicate what we believe. And please hear me. I want to share my faith. I do share my faith regularly. But I think we should assume the position of a student. We should assume the posture of a student. And we should share a table and ask questions. And it's the single best thing you can do. Go to the cafeteria at your school. If you're, in a home, if you're a college leader, open up your home once a month for your students to invite a non-Christian friend to come and share a meal in your home. Ask them questions. Why are you a Muslim? You were a Christian who became an atheist. Why did you lose your faith? You're Jewish culturally, but maybe you don't practice. Why are you a cultural? Why are you so committed to your cultural Judaism, but you're not practicing your Judaism, or whatever the case might be? Share a meal, share the table, and ask questions. And I promise you, it'll lead to developing friendships. And the other thing is, it'll lead to them asking you questions about your own faith, and you're going to have very natural opportunities to share your faith. I've shared my faith with hundreds of Muslims, and almost every time it's been at their request, which is so different for us as Christians. We've been trained our whole lives here. Here's how to get into someone's life and share your faith with when they don't want you to. I tell people all the way, faith is not a taboo conversation for everybody in the world except for white people in America. We're the only people who don't want to talk about religion. Everybody else wants to talk about faith. It's a normal part of their conversation. That's true in the U.S. with minorities. It's true overseas with people of faith or non-faith. It's not hard to have a conversation about faith with somebody who doesn't believe in Jesus. But I would say you need, and here's the thing, please hear me when I'm saying this. I'm not talking about bait and switch. I'm not talking about a strategy on your part where I'm going to ask these questions so that I can share my faith. No, I'm talking about being a genuine friend, showing someone I respect you, you have worth, you have value, even if you disagree with me. I love you and I want to treat you as someone who I respect and as someone who has value. And I'm curious to know more about your faith. And they're inevitably going to ask you questions about yours, and you're going to be able to share with them. But it starts with respecting them, showing them that you love them and that you believe they have dignity and inherent worth.
Yeah. Man, that's so good. I think with the one thing that you kept talking about, Micah, was the table. And, I've always found just in my personal ministry, even in, my neighborhood, that for some reason, the table brings out the spiritual conversations. I think as long as you're, like you said, we're not trying to bait and switch somebody, but really get to know somebody very genuinely, have a conversation. And, man, I've been able to do more ministry in my neighborhood by opening up a table than I have anything else. Not saying that other ways of doing ministries, not valid, but I've just seen so much fruit from that, and I can only imagine that, especially with MultiFaith, and especially you think about if you're a student here from the United States, there's a student, an international student, or there's somebody from a different faith that's at your school that maybe is just feeling like homeless, because they're like living in a dorm and they don't have the luxuries of being at home and having someone care for them to invite them to your table. I mean, I just can only imagine the kind of credibility and just the friendship that can come from just inviting somebody to a table and asking those questions. That's really good.
Well, and so much of this is, and I'm just telling you, my Muslim and Jewish friends believe this to be the case. They believe Christians only want to be their friends so that they can evangelize them. Yeah. Which strips away their belief. They don't think that we respect them or that we believe that they have worth or dignity. Yeah. I want every person in the world to follow Jesus. Yeah. That shouldn't surprise anyone. I'm a real evangelical. I mean, it's in the name. Yeah. But if they don't believe, I'm going to love them, respect them, and have a desire to work with them because they're made in the image of God. They have worth and dignity. By the way, that's at the heart of our pro-life argument, right? Yeah. We argue that you shouldn't abort a Down syndrome baby. Well, it's not going to be productive. It's going to have difficulties. It doesn't matter. We argue that they have worth because they are. They're created in the image of God. Why don't we treat our neighbors in the same way?
Yeah, that's good. Mitch, something, I'm just recognizing when I think about college ministry landscape, and our audience here is primarily church-based college ministry leaders, but honestly, the parachurch and campus-based ministries really lead the way in these engagements far better than many of the church-based ministries. And I'm thinking back to my own days when I directed a Baptist collegiate ministry at SIU Carbondale, and one of the most fruitful ministries we had was a free international student lunch that happened once a week in our building. And the conversations there I had with people of all different types of faiths from many different countries really served me in many of the ways that Micah has mentioned with the, just strengthening my own faith and help me understand what I believe and why, and learning from others what they believe instead of just, like you said, taking the white evangelical perspective on what those people believe. So just, as I'm hearing him talk and reflecting on my own experience, it's such a good thing. And so if I could just speak a word to the church-based ministers who are listening, one, you may not have to create these opportunities. They may already exist with other evangelical organizations on your campus. So it could be an opportunity just partnering better with the BCM or another ministry that's building bridges in a multi-faith community. But also, if there is an opportunity, leverage that. You may have people in your church who the primary way they could help serve and reach students is to cook. They may not be able to do a lot of intellectual gymnastics and engage on that level ideologically in a college environment. But by golly, they love to cook and they would love to show hospitality in your church building or maybe even their home. So this is a way to even broaden and help have a more holistic view of the Christian faith, that it's not just the belief of 20-something white kids at a university campus, but it's a rich multi-generational thing that and the other piece of that for me, what I saw is many students from other cultures, other faiths, other countries, when they were exposed to the idea of Christianity and even warmed to Jesus, the cost of them embracing that was really high in terms of what they were saying no to. And so being able to evidence for them, no, actually, yeah, there is a family for you here. And it's not just people like you, it's people older than you, it's people younger than you. That's how local church ministries can really, I think, lead the way and have a unique impact when it comes to exhibiting the faith to those from other cultures. So, yeah.
Well, and I think what you just said is so important, Chase. This is not hard. Like, I think sometimes we're so fearful of engaging people who disagree with us because we're scared we're not going to have the answers. Look, I engage with my friends all the time on issues that I don't know the answers to, but I have a relationship with them. And so if I don't know the answer, I can say, I don't know the answer. Let me figure it out. Or they're not going to look down on me because I don't know the answer. Relationships are not hard. I tell people all the time, every person on the planet is good at evangelism. And let me explain what I mean. Evangelism is just what? Telling good news, right? That's literally the definition of what evangelism means. I've never met somebody who had a baby who is bad at telling others about their new baby. Yeah. I've never met someone whose team won the World Series who is bad at telling others about their team winning the World Series. Mm-hmm. We're all good at sharing good news. But the problem is we're sometimes bad at formulaic expressions of how to do that. I have to memorize the right words and that sort of thing. Be friends, share your faith, love people always. That's not hard.
Yeah.
Open up your home, do those things, and I'm telling you, be amazed at how I'm just transform your own faith.
That's good, man. Hey, Mike, is there any resources you'd recommend college leaders out there that want to dive into this a little bit more?
Yeah, let me recommend a couple things. One, this is we made a lot of pragmatic arguments about why to be involved. There's some theological arguments that need to be considered. Does MultiFaith, is it a biblical concept? And so myself, Dr. Steve Besner from Houston's Northwest Church, and Dr. Bob Roberts, we put together a theology of multi-faith, a Christian theology of multi-faith. It's a fairly short, concise theology. I think you all are going to put it in the liner notes of the podcast. You can also find it just on micahfreeze.com by going to the blog section. It's like the third article down or something like that. I would recommend that. It might give you some stuff to work through with your college students. Let's think about a theology of multi-faith and why this matters theologically. And then I would also recommend our Multi-Faith Neighbors Network website, mfnn.org. mfnn.org. If you go on the front page, it'll say I'm a Christian leader, I'm a Muslim leader, I'm a Jewish leader. And if you click on that, I am a Christian leader, it'll walk you through theologically. Why does this matter from a Christian perspective? Historically, why does this matter? There's a video on there from one of our Christian leaders that we work with. The Christian one happens to be from Jeff Vanderstelt, who leads Saturate Network and the Soma family of churches. I was with Jeff 2 days ago in Seattle. So Jeff has kind of a testimony of why this matters to him and why he's been involved with the Multi-Faith Neighbors Network. And I think Matt Carter may be on there as well. Matt's been working with us for a few years as well. Used to be at Austin Stone, now is in Houston. And so it walks you through theology. You see personal testimonies of folks who have been involved. And then it also says, well, here's how we can help you get involved in multi-faith in your own community. And so, check out that Christian theology of multi-faith and then mfnn.org.
That's good.
Awesome.
Man, we made it all the way through this podcast without bringing up the Green Bay Packers Dallas Cowboys rivalry.
Don't do
Let me show you what came in the mail yesterday.
What?
My owner's certificate. I'm now a part owner of the Green Bay Packers.
Oh, man.
So we've got a Dallas, Fort Worth native, diehard Dallas Cowboys fan, and a part owner of the Green Bay Packers. And y'all didn't fight at all. This is amazing.
I didn't
The gospel must be true, guys. It must be
My
true.
parents just moved back to Wisconsin. We are diehard Packer fans in our house, man. Go Pack
Oh,
Go.
man.
Now, my wife's from Kansas City, so we love the Chiefs too. My son loves the Chiefs, but we're Packer fans.
Yeah.
And, I grew up, Dallas Cowboy fan for sure. Loved Brett Favre, so was actually a fan of the Packers. And I really do love the Packers. I love the organization, just the town owns it. There's so much. In fact, bucket list item is to go watch a Dallas Cowboy game at Lambeau Field before I die. But I want it late fall, early winter. I want it to be cold. I just want the whole experience.
I'm with you. Needs to be freezing cold, snow coming down.
Yes.
Frozen tundra, baby.
But it's like these last couple of years, ever since 2014, you know where I'm going here, Des caught it, there has just been a deep-seated hatred of the Packers that I can't quite get over. However, I did root for them against the Rams, though. The Rams are easy to root against.
Appreciate that. We look good right now.
Yeah.
I think it's arguable we're the best team in the NFL right as of today. We'll see what happens. But
True.
Good news is we're on bye week when we're recording this, and so Aaron Rodgers gets a week off. Don't ask me what I think about Aaron Rodgers. I may not be the biggest fan of him as an individual, but I really like that he throws the football for my team.
Dude, as a player, he's hard to argue against. It's great.
Hard to argue. That's the truth, man.
That's good.
Well, I'm hoping when the Cowboys do play in Lambeau, Aaron has retired and moved on. And
the Jordan Love era has begun.
Because I just don't – Aaron he gets us every time. So
yeah, he's so good.
Yeah, he is. Well, Micah, thanks for jumping on, man. We really appreciate it and really enjoyed this conversation. And, man, we'll have to have you on again. There's so many different roads we could go down here. And man, I just think this is going to be really helpful for the leaders in our network. So thanks, man. Friends, thank you for joining us on this Roundup podcast with Micah Freeze. We hope it's beneficial, helpful, and a resource to you. Hey, don't forget to follow us on social media at SBTC Collegiate and subscribe to our YouTube channel where we host these podcasts in the form of video and create a lot of clips, hopefully creating a great resource for you to use and even share with your friends. Well, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.